Looks like we are live. So, hello everybody, welcome back to another Fellowship of Fans stream. And if you haven't noticed, we're 5 subscribers away from 7,000. So, if you make sure to drop a little sub just to support us and hit that goal. And speaking around all that, we have Jaron here. Hello, my friend.
Hey, how you doing?
Great man, great man. And I think if you actually want to first introduce yourself for maybe some people who don't know who you are.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a little while. It's been really busy, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm Jaron Peck. I write for Looper. That's as a press person, I write for Looper, and I've been covering the show a lot. And then I also host the Halfling podcast, and we do a lot of breakdowns of different characters and kind of vent all my Lord of the Rings knowledge and lore that I don't get to do in the press stuff because that's always limited with space and everything. So yeah, those are the two main things, and I'm on Twitter too, obviously. So.
Indeed, and I think one of the privileges, I guess, for when you're writing for someone like Lupa is that you've been able to provide us a really, really great in-depth interview, which you were able to do with none other than Robert Aramayo. And I think, I'm sure, unless some of you guys have already in the live chat have read the interview, it is one of the best ones so far, I think, in terms of you can read how it was written by a Tolkien fan. The questions asked, I think, we were talking about this before. A lot of the stuff that the cast are saying now is quite similar, but here you really made, I think, Robert delve into his character and some, and I see a little bit of a few cheeky stuff as well around Celebrimbor that we'll get back to in a bit. So yeah, doing the service to the fan base. So yeah, the title is Robert Aramayo sheds light on a younger Elrond in the Rings of Power. So if we would just scroll down here, and I think you just give your introduction here.
Yeah,
So
that's just the it's not boilerplate. I mean, it's unique each time, but it's just setting up the questions and answers.
yeah, and it's yeah, I think then the first main heading is Elrond feels unresolved about his past when Rings of Power start. So this is your first question here. Do you want to quickly talk through your first question and what you are potentially hoping to get from this?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd heard Robert kind of answer this question a couple different times from different reporters and stuff. But as you're saying, I mean, I've got the knowledge to really I wanted to try to dig in a little more and get him to give us a little bit more. And so I brought it up in kind of a context of this has all just happened. I think the question right after this, I think I also bring up like the idea of age and how with time compression he's in this unique position, and as far as being immature and mature all in the same story. And so yeah, I want to start off right at the beginning with like, what is the position you're in when this starts, when all of this, there's a lot that's gone on. We know you're connected to everybody, and then we heard it briefly touched on in the whole "you have not seen what I've seen," and I saw some responses where people are like, I think Elrond's seen some stuff, and it's like, that's true, he's seen some really, really rough and nasty and intense stuff, and he's got a close bond with a guy that attacked his people, right? Because it's just, he's, the whole backstory there is rough. So so I wanted to start out with that and see if I could get a little more out of him. And I excuse me, I really liked the whole who am I? I mean, he's struggling with who he is here. I'm trying to remember where, I think this isn't the question where he digs into a little bit later on, he kind of dug into the idea that he's got a lot to live up to
with his family, I think.
Yeah, but that ties into this setting of where he is when this starts. He's not Elrond of Rivendell, right? He's just Elrond, like the Lost.
Elrond the Lost, yeah. And I think another interesting thing that I think he conveyed was that he's young. He's one of the youngest elves here. And I think, even here he said, who am I? He's closer to being an orphan than he is to being a lord. But he's trying so hard to be the herald of Gil-galad. So, yeah, I think really from this one, we really got to see more into his character and how he's having this own personal, not even identity crisis, but more of like he's searching with himself to find out who he is and where he's going to fit in this world. Is he going to stay the herald of Gil-galad? He's not a lordy, and I think I really like that balance that we saw from Robin. So do you think you were able to get that too?
Yeah, for sure. And the follow-up there on Elros was I actually pulled that forward in the interview because I wanted to talk about him, and he's talking about this backstory, and it's like, Elros is 500 years of his life, and then he dies because he's mortal. but it's his twin brother. And so it's like, how is he going to factor into it? And he didn't have a ton to say there, but
No.
nobody's really pushed into that yet. So I really
Yeah.
wanted to hear his thoughts on.
Mm-hmm.
And he, as a Tolkien fan, I mean, he's a huge. The entire experience reinforced the fact that this guy knows Tolkien really well. He enjoys digging into it, and
Yeah.
and so he wants to see Elros in it more. I'll tell you that much.
Sure. It'd be interesting if he plays Elros, maybe. That'd be quite a funny twist on it. Actually, I did see, I know he'd never do it, people are maybe saying potentially what happens if Hugo Weaving comes back and plays Elros. Of course, he'd be able to look older and look more like a man now because, you know, the Numenorean age and he's not an elf, but and immortal. Actually, no, to be fair, Robert Aramayo actually did get into the discussion about immortality and specifically to Elrond character himself later on. I think we'll pick up on. But I think with the Elros thing, I think whether it gets mentioned to us or not, that'd be interesting. Do you think it's beneficial if maybe they tap into the character of Elros, at least his past, in order to add that extra layer to Elrond's character?
Well, yeah. So I'm like, as I'm looking back through this, the amount I talked, I'm embarrassed by how much I talked, but a lot of it was trying to get it back and forth because there's so many details to bring up. And one of the third part of this initial question was the idea that if the time compression is 1,000 years, then Elros was alive for half of that. He's not like he's a mortal lifespan and then he's a Glinton might passed or something. It's like he was alive for half of the time of Elrond's life up until this point. So I hope there's more of that in there. It sounds like it's not something where they've just written it off, but obviously he's not going to be alive 1,000 years into the Second Age.
And it's interesting, this 1,000 years, is that a floating figure or has that been confirmed?
I brought that up because that has not been confirmed by anyone. I'm not confirming that at all. That has been brought up generally as roughly how far into this age it is. And when I brought it up in the interview, he didn't shoot that down. So I think that was generally kind of the accepted amount that
that's fair. And it'll be interesting to see if Amazon do get into the specifics, you know, of how time where it is. I think if they do to a large extent, it will start bringing up problems. Okay, yeah, there were 1,000, but this Numenorean king lived up to 500, and they've got like, but how come by Farazon there should be like 23 or something? So it's like you know, we had that discussion. But
I could see something where maybe they decline the lifespan quicker, and that's why Farazon feels the pressure. But I mean, it's like their version of the multiverse, where this is just the MCU is getting to be a mess now because you can't track everything. And if they compress time and then they start to try to make sense of it, it's going to be interesting to see if they can really do that or not.
And I agree. I think even the MCS all over the place at the minute. And then he says, I think you say, no, based on what we've had, the time compression, recent history in the eyes of the immortals. The next part, the next section is Elrond is young for an elf, and that's a really interesting take. So I think even in the comments live chat right now, people are discussing, hey, isn't Gil-galad quite young as well? But despite on which time period he was born in. But I think going through this question here, I think you're really tapping into how his age will affect that if that his age will add the nuance to his character that he has in the Third Age, or whereby instead right now he's young, he's not even a healer to a large degree yet, but it does look like he is a law master. I think is what they're going for right now.
I think so, yeah. And I think that so first of all, I will agree with the chat that Gil-galad is an interesting question because he's older than Elrond, but I mean, if you're talking giant immortal lifespans, the gap is much closer to. With them, it's a smaller gap, right, than like say Galadriel or someone that's older. So that'll be interesting to see and to try to give weight to Gil-galad if you're not going to give the same weight to Elrond. That will be interesting. But the goal here was really more. Most of these characters coming into the show have significant Silmarillion experience and earlier, and so when you the only one that really stands out there is Elrond, where it's like he's basically a kid, especially in like Nature of Middle Earth. When you break down the way that they mature, like 60 years old or whatever it is, he's not really that old. And then by the end of the age, he's half of the way to what we see in Lord of the Rings, even more. And he has gone through all of his significant moments. And so, how do you balance that in the course of a human? Like again, especially with that time compression in there. How do you make sense of that? So, and I think that the way he kind of went to was he's facing all of these things in his past and these choices in front of him, and I think it's going to be if I had to guess, it'd be that he's going to be launching his kind of setting his course that will get him to all the stuff we know and the things that Tolkien talked about. So.
And I think this is a really good opportunity for McPain to tap into this characterization of Elrond, whereby even he says that he is young in terms of our elves. He's the youngest elf that we see in the show. So he is young, but he's still been around for a while. I think seeing that journey, I think, that character from the beginning, the arc, I hope we'll probably see that play throughout the show. Of course, whenever at some point he finds Imladris, I think that'll be an interesting, well, not interesting, but a quite pivotal moment for his character as well. And I think later on, I think this is a future question that you raised around him potentially being a warrior. So we'll get to that in a bit. I think that also plays into this of, he's a healer, but he's also a warrior.
Well, that's the thing. Apart from his family, which again, the Celebrian question later and all that, like apart from his family, and there are things he does in the Third Age, lots of things, but he is himself by the beginning of the Third Age, and then he sets up his family, and then he's off to the races. The whole Second Age, there's thing after thing happening to him that are formative experiences, and so we're looking at. I mean, we're going to meet him right before all that starts, and so it's going to be interesting to see him kind of form. I think somebody had mentioned, I don't know if it was on Fellowship of Fans or not, but the idea that he's more or less a main character here. He has the potential to be a main character that the show can center on, because he's going to have that kind of evolution of character more than I think most will. So.
Yeah, I think him and Isildur are going to go on an interesting journey in the show. I think by the end we're going to see, if they of course go with Peter Jackson way, we'll see them up there. So it'll be quite interesting. I think talking about future relationships, we're going on to Galadriel is in Elrond's life, but they aren't as close as they will be in the future. So what were you going for here with this question? Like, what answer did you wish that Robert would have given? Did you think he gave it?
Yeah, I think he answered it well. As I was forming the question, so I did like a 5-part series on Elrond back in the spring on the Halfling, and one of the things that kept coming up as I was Galadriel just weaves in and out of his life over and over again, and as they get older, they become kind of heads of state together. They keep intersecting on the White Council, and they're obviously relatives, and then they're dealing with the rings, and they have elven rings. I mean, there's all these ways that they connect, but when you start right here, it's this one unique deviation point of Galadriel's already well established and you're brand new, and you're not married into the family. You don't have an elven ring. You haven't proven yourself. So what does that relationship look like? And his answer was really interesting, because it sounds like the way they're setting it up is that Galadriel is going to be a proven entity, and he is trying to stand up and hold up in a world where there are already these important people. And she's going to be an important one. Obviously, she becomes really important in his life. But
indeed, and I think he even says it here when talking about Galadriel. She's a legend already to him, so he admires her, and that's where he finds out the first difficult decision he has to make. I think that point clarifies. I think summarizes directly what he says. And I think Priscilla TV says, in the stream from yesterday, it was theorized, we talked about it, that the show would go with Gil-galad being the son of Orodreth, making his connection to Galadriel closer. I think I mentioned this a bit, having Orodreth potentially be, and whether it be Galadriel's brother or nephew, whichever way they want to do with that. But I think having that Gil-galad and Galadriel connection, even though separate from this, I think is still, an interesting thing that we can tap into later on. But I think Robert's answer is good. Then speaking more about Galadriel, he says she's powerful, man. Not she's a powerful man. I say that's really, she's powerful, man. See, Jaron, thank you for putting the comments in there. Should have looked at that. In so many ways. He admires how headstrong she is and what she's done and what she's seen. It's pretty difficult to ignore. She's one of his heroes. So I think a lot of looking. I think again in this what we've been able to see in this article is a lot of looking up. I think we're looking up to Galadriel, looking up to Gil-galad. I think we're going to be seeing that as a trait, maybe even with potentially Celebrimbor, who we see right here. Elrond is counted among the immortals and under pressure to perform. And with this section, are you talking about now more his what we're going to see with this character throughout the show, that he has this drive now, and he's got all this family around him who his father, people might say his father and mother saved the world, and his brother was the founding, king of Numenor, and so that pressure is there for Elrond to succeed. Is that what you're trying to tap into here?
Kind of. So this was one of those interesting questions. I enjoy when actors do this. So I was aiming more for you're going to be a lore master, but we're going to see you fighting, which is kind of honestly a more simplistic question compared to the answer I got here. But one of the things I actually sent the article to my dad this morning, and his main feedback was he really enjoyed how much I kind of gave him free rein to answer questions. I didn't cubbyhole him in a certain direction or force the conversation. And this is one of those instances where one of the things that I really liked about his answer was he took this and ran in that direction of there's a lot of things where he's trying to live up to all of this pressure, whereas I was really just wondering more about him needing to fight versus become a lore master. And the answer is really, really interesting because just looking through here, he starts to go into the immortal aspect. And where's the quote here? Because this is the section, I think, where he talks about counted, right? He's counted among the immortal. And it's right. The whole what does half elven mean? And
he's immortal, but to me suggests something interesting about what mortality means to him, and literally what mortality is inside of him. If you had to cut him up, he's immortal, but what does half elven mean was one of the most interesting questions about creating him.
Yep. Which is so I really liked this because it kind of took the conversation in this interesting direction of he's a meeting of ways, and I think we always talk about him as he's related to everybody, and he's got a heart for men and a heart for, unless the PJ movies make him look a little more like he's annoyed with men, but it's like he's half man, like he's got man, he's got elf, he's got Maiar, so he's got this mix, and that sure, like when you back out from a third party perspective, all of these things run through him, but to be him, there's a lot of inner questioning and turmoil, and there's a reason he's allowed to choose, because what's the decision here? It was an interesting thing to hear him having wrestled with that. So he's not just like, well, I'm an immortal lore master. It's like, no, he's aware of the background going into this character, and that hasn't been resolved yet. And so I really liked the answer here. It was way more than I was expecting.
Indeed. And I think even getting on to the next part, is this where we're seeing more of the nerd side of Rob Aramayo coming out, and he talks about 116, I think. And while we're talking about this, could you talk to us from how much is Rob Aramayo a nerd? How much does he know Tolkien's works?
Yeah, so he's I can confirm what is already out there, that he got more into it as he was on the show, but there's no doubt that he's always been into this, and as he's dug into the source material, I mean, you can see it here. He says, "What is you can go mental? You can lose your mind to this stuff." And I think he's referencing his own experience there. Like, there's a lot here, and he loves it. And so it was fun when we got on the call. We talked for a few minutes beforehand, and we talked for a few minutes after. And they kind of had to pull us apart with the conversation because he really wanted to talk about it. I mean, he was into answering the questions. And when I dug a little too much with things like Celebrimbor, where it's like, okay, you're touching things I'm not allowed to talk about, he had the right answers. But anytime I hit him with a question that was tough, but he was allowed to answer, man, he just opened up and had fun with it. And he had answers. And he was asking me questions about the Nature of Middle-earth book that I got it behind me here. He's like, he didn't see it. He was asking me, have you read this book, the Nature of Middle-earth one yet? And I was like, I got it right here. And we're talking about the immortal elfish aging part of it. And it's like, he really knows his stuff, and he's embraced the lore master persona on the set. I can definitely.
And I remember from the London event, we were told specifically by the showrunners that he literally in the hair salons, when they're doing, they have to have a book club where he would not say force, but he would encourage people to give answers, and they would do that. And even Steve says here, I think of all the actors involved, the understanding of the character and the weight of the role really pleases me about Rob. And I do really think, that's shown off. And again, for some of you missed it at the start, I think what Jaron's done here with Robert Aramayo, I think luckily Robert Aramayo probably would have wanted this. He's up to the tasks of how much he knows, but Darren's really tapped into, the real lore, these not hard-hitting, but these really in-depth questions about, the characterization of Elrond, the themes of, how his life, how it's been in the past, his parents, and how this is all going to affect him later on, and his progression of his character throughout the show. And I think, yeah, as I said before, you can really tell that these were really well thought out questions by from someone who has, just like Jaron has read a lot of Tolkien. So I think this was really pleasing about this article. And I think even here, you obviously say Aragorn's a little bit less, but still, this isn't a cut and dry issue, right? And he says, no, definitely not. He's the mutt of the Legendarium.
Yes,
Everything
I love that.
feeds into him. Yes, a great line. And it's why he was given the choice in the first place. If you look at where he comes from, I read this thing. He's 160th Maya and 860 this. It's mental if you wanted to break it down. So it makes a lot of sense that he was given the choice. And and what he said before that around the fact that he feels like, he said when he's reading Silmarillion, he's like everything connects to Elrond. He is, not technically everything connects to Elrond, but a lot of these things tap into this character. Is connected to him. Like, again, his mother and father basically, help save the world. You look at the representation in Numenor at the minute. We're seeing maybe the potential statue, seeing Elring
everywhere.
Yeah, and I think seeing this all around him with his brother, I think he talks about it here, and he says, "Yeah, but I really like that line you were able to get. He is the mutt of the Legendarium." What do you think?
Yeah, I love that, and it really does. You can take all of the First Age stories and trace them to him. You can. I'm saying that a little flippantly, but I think you can trace pretty much everything to him. And then you've got the Numenor adjacent stuff in the Second Age, and then obviously he's, front and center with everything going on with the Rings of Power and confronting Sauron and Rivendell, and then of course the whole end of the age showdown in Mordor, and then of course he's Third Age. So he's just everywhere, and it's a lot in a story where, like, I've been seeing a lot of other articles that are just talking about, for people not like those of us here in this conversation and listening, where we know the story. For anyone who doesn't, there's these articles going up that are like, is this based on a book, or why is this not based on a Tolkien book? And of course, if you see it and Tolkien, you're like, oh, I know what they're going to say in that article. It's that there's no actual book for this. It's that it's a bunch of pieces. And Elrond is the one character here that I would say has potentially the most existing source material and weight and the job of adapting a real character that people understand way more than, Galadriel's in the running there. I think her backstory in Unfinished Tales is so complicated that it's easier to kind of have more wiggle room on interpretation. Elrond is fairly straightforward, and so the idea that he's got a lot on his shoulders, and so I agree with, I forgot who he said in the chat, but it's good to know that this is the guy that really cares, and that I've talked to other members in the cast, and that we've seen interviews, and they all know stuff. They all care about this a lot. But there's no question that Aramayo is in a front runner for just his head knowledge is very high.
And I agreed. I think it'll be really, really interesting to see, seeing how all these great things are being said, and just waiting for the performance now, which is only not that far away.
So close.
So close. So, and I think moving on to the next part, we're tapping into, as Atoko Senpai was saying in chat, he was talking about Galadriel and Gil-galad, how he wants Gil-galad to have a much major role, but we are seeing it here. And I think I really like how you've titled this. Gil-galad is Elrond's mentor, and actor Benjamin Walker is kind of the same for Aramayo. So we've seen that double parallel right there. So, and I'll ask this again. So, what way did you think you got what you wanted from an answer from Aramayo in regards to his relationship that Elrond has with Gil-galad? Do you think he has portrayed that relation? Hopefully, is hopefully going to be quite good when we're going to see it in the show.
Yeah. So a lot of the way I phrase these, and the reason that some of the questions are kind of longer, is because I wanted to set him up to really not spend time explaining the relationship between Gil-galad and Elrond. It's like, no. I'll just come out and say, okay, these guys are lumped together. There are points in the text where they're both concerned something's coming. When Anatar shows up, they're both resistant. So what are we going to see that in the show? And that kind of jumped him straight into this answer about how there is a mentorship going on there, which is interesting with the age question there, right? That Gil-galad's not way older than him, but he is in a higher position, and he does have experience that Elrond missed out on, significant experience. So, there's almost the feel of like a veteran of a war that's just 22 or 23 years old, but then you got the new private coming in, and it's like, this guy may only be 2 or 3 years older than you, but he's seen stuff. And so Gil-galad is in that position, and Elrond is clearly serving him. And it's interesting to hear that that Benjamin Walker is in that similar position, because I think it's a very parallel, right? I mean, Ben has more. I don't know. I haven't looked at the specific dates of when they did things, but I think he's got more experience than Robert, and he's had some more headlining experience.
Yeah.
And but he's not way ahead of him. I mean, they're both in their prime, and so it's cool to see that they're able to slide into that role on and off screen.
I think Benjamin Walker really fits Gil-galad. I think seeing him, he's a presence even in Comic-Con. I think the way he was,
So
showing himself, he's so tall. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Have you met him in person?
I have. You walk up to him and it's just like, okay, you're clearly an Elven Lord. Like whether you're in gold or in a suit, like you just are. He's got a presence. He absolutely, and he holds himself. You can see it in interviews. He holds himself very confidently, and he answers questions very confidently. And he knows a lot of the lore too. It's another one of those things. Yeah, it's cool to know that they're working together and that they have a relationship like that on the show.
Yeah. But it's interesting that's not the only relationship Elrond might have, because we actually have seen quite a lot of his potential relationship with during the fourth, which is quite interesting as well. But to the answer he gave, he's my king. I'm serving him. He's telling me where to go and what to do, which might tap into why he's at Khazad-dûm. Because that's, around Elrond, I think for a lot of the characters, we know potentially, most likely, what they are doing in this first season. Like, we kind of have an idea. It leaks aside, where they're going. We see the end bit of that village. We see the sea. We've got Theo, we've got Elrond, we've got Bronwyn, we've got Halbrand, we've got Miriel, we've got Isildur, we've got Elendil, we've got Galadriel, all at this place. And then you could kind of tell where Farazan's going to go this season with the Kingsmen. But here, with Elrond, except from with being at Khazad-dûm in the first few episodes, we still don't know truly. I think that's one of the exciting things. I think we were talking about this beforehand, that I'm going to start to think we're getting to a period where we're getting a lot piled on us. And I think a lot being shown about this show effectively, but still with Elrond is something that's been quite untapped, except from this article, which I think, which I've quite liked. It still doesn't go into the story too much, but it gives more of a context around his character, which I think is really important. But I think back to what he said, if you look at the great achievements of Gil-galad, there are a reflection of them in the deeds of Elrond, which me and Ben both really like. Also, as a side note, it's like art imitating life or something. Ben is a bit of a mentor to me, but that's great. I really enjoy the relationship, and it's got loads more in it. I think that's the last part, which is exciting, that there is a lot more in it. Then the next question you asked was a good follow-up. Is that Gil-galad and Elrond are both described as people who, when Sauron does show up, they're nervous. Gil-galad, right from the get-go, and the promotional material is like something is coming and something's wrong is here. And I think a nice parallel to this, of course, the lore, we don't know what time period, but we know when when Anatar first entered Lindon, it was mainly, Gil-galad. Then Elrond, to some degree, he wasn't let in because, they had this idea that this person might not be who he seems. And not, of course, we can't say maybe if it's foresight that much, but the fact that they can sense their presence. I think we're getting a little bit of a mirroring here with this. Something's coming, something's wrong here. So, yeah. And I think he written. What did you think of this response he gave around Mr. S?
So that caught me off guard. I don't know if anyone else has referred to him as that before.
Yeah, no.
But he said it with it had a twinkle in his eye when he said it. This kind of, you mean Mr. S? And I had to think for yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Because you can tell they're dancing around it in this first season. But yeah, it sounds like they're close, because Elrond is almost an not an afterthought, but a footnote when it talks about, it's like Gil-galad recognizes the danger, or in the letter he writes to I forget which one, in Unfinished Tales to Aldarian's father. I forget. But anyways, he writes the letter to the King of Numenor, and he's like, there's a presence stirring.
Yeah, Tom and Eldor, I think.
That's it. Yeah, and it's like he feels something is coming. And a couple of times Elrond is connected to it. And there's a point in Unfinished Tales, I think, where the whole bit with Celebrimbor, where it says Gil-galad and Elrond wouldn't let him in. And so there's even an empowering of Elrond's character there, that he's authoritative, right, in that sentence. And so that was what I was digging for here. And it sounds like, Elrond he's not going to just be following orders. It sounds like he's actually on the inner loop here with Gil-galad, and kind of going to definitely be concerned about stuff that's
Hmm.
going on.
And Tar Lenion even to add to your points gives a quote from letter 131: Gil-galad repulsed all such overtures, as also did Elrond. And I think
Yes.
from that answer there, I think really does, we're getting that here hopefully. And for this next part, I think it's really interesting that I'm not sure that you're allowed to go this far into it, because I think this is like something that's not coming in this year. It's really interesting, man. He eventually gets the Ring of Power. That's going to be in this season, but it's a really you've given him again, but is that really a good thing? You're making him really think here, which I
Uh-huh.
really like. And I think that was a really, and I think you can agree. I think he was up to the task, and
Oh my goodness.
yeah, with his
This answer
response.
blew me away.
Mm-hmm.
It honestly, as a Tolkien fan, blew me away. It wasn't like, oh, you had the answer I knew. It was like,
Yeah.
I have never even really thought of it this way.
Yeah, he says, yes, in the future, I suppose. But what's so interesting about the Rings of Power is they channel what's already inside of you. The extent to magic, or the idea of magic, the idea of the machine that Mr. Tolkien talked about so much. You got Mr. S and Mr. Tolkien. For the elves, the rings,
Very respectful.
yeah, very, are the machine. And I wonder how he feels about it. He doesn't get that ring straight away. It's another one of those interesting moments, an interesting question that hopefully the show will answer, or what he doesn't, or when he does. That's all for the future, hopefully. I think, of course, the last part is all for the future,
Yeah,
but
of course.
yeah, I think that it does really feel your confidence this type of answer. And I think yeah, even going now, but going now that you mentioned here that Celebrimbor, the one negative influence here is that he wants the science and the knowledge. I think, and it's the machine aspect, and he's channeling it into these rings. There is the dark side to even the elven rings, right? I think that's a really interesting thing to touch upon, because of course, even though they're made in separate from from Antar, his touch still unique. You can say his presence is, you can still have them in the rings. And yeah, I think what do you think about the comparisons and things he's made here with Christopher Tolkien here? What did you think we were just saying all this in the interview?
I loved this whole idea because to me the Elven rings were always, I'm a little ashamed of myself because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff, and I never thought of the Elven rings beyond the idea that they're just a positive tool, but that, oh no, if Sauron gets the one ring, they can't use them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And this approach here of, there's a almost a negative influence that they can have on the user, on the wearer, and it's not that they're power hungry or, like a dwarf, they're going to accentuate that idea of wanting wealth. They're going to accentuate positive, good things, but they're going to shortcut it. And he talks about that, I think, in the follow up, where the last line in the section, people trying to supersede or jump ahead, and thinking about it in that context, that Tolkien didn't like industry and
Yeah.
technology because it was inherently evil, but because it pushed humanity in a direction that was not natural, not normal, not designed. And so the idea that elves, I think Tolkien was a Catholic, and there's this concept that when Christians look at sin, I think there's the sin that Satan tempted me and I did something, and then there's the sin that's the fallen flesh, the natural proclivities of flesh. And I think that's what we're seeing here, is the idea that just because it isn't Sauron made this and therefore it's evil, it's leading the elves into this direction that's more negative, that is pulling them in a direction that is not the natural order, right? Not the natural order that Iluvatar ordained. And so the thought that he's thinking that seasons before he gets a ring is like, oh my goodness. It was really impressive to me that he was making me think a lot. I'm trying to keep up with my questions, and I'm like trying to process what he's saying. It was really cool. I liked it.
Yeah, and I think I think even you've done a good job there summarizing all that as well. And I think, of course, I'll probably tap into this part more than you, because I don't want to get you into trouble. But it's talking about Elrond's initial holds significant value. So in the character posters, we'll stay on the ring topic. You are shown with a ring and a golden rod with a city on top. Are those significant? Do we get to know what they are, or things you're wearing, or are those things you're wearing until the the ring takes its place? So he says they are significant to him, to his past, to his character. That city is very important to his past. So I was actually able to speak to some people, and I think they're able to confirm that this was a part of the Gondolin. I think is really, really interesting. We don't actually see Gondolin in the show, Spoiler,
do
I
now.
don't. Hmm? Yeah,
We do now.
we actually technically, yeah, we are, but yeah, but it's interesting that, of course, you weren't told. I just like to reinforce
Yes.
that Jaron wasn't told this.
I'm not confirming
Yeah.
what it says, but if I had to guess, it's. I mean, what other significant cities
Yeah,
are in his past
significant.
that are
Mm-hmm.
that are that beautiful looking, right? that
Oh,
looks
for
like a
sure.
really nice city.
For sure, yeah.
So,
It reminds me, is it that Alan Lee painting? I'm not.
I'm trying to think of what the tower in Gondolin is. There's one really tall tower, right?
Yeah.
Is it the Tower of Turgon or something?
Sure.
But if somebody in the chat has it,
Yeah, someone has
there's
that.
that one significant tower sticking up out of it, and then there's a bunch of stuff that it looks a lot like the one with Tuor arrive. I think it's Alan Lee where he's arriving. It's the cover of the of the book. I've got it here somewhere.
So yeah, guys. Yeah, yeah.
I can't see it, but yeah, I think that's the idea. I might have it behind me.
Yeah.
No, I don't have it. Okay, but yeah, I think it has a similar feel, right? Where it's that almost like goes up into the points.
If you give me 30 seconds, I can see if I can try and get. I'll try and pull it up.
One second. Sure. I wish I normally have it on my shelf here, but I think I'm in the middle of rereading it. So, but yeah, I think that's got to be the thing he's hinting at. The ring thing is interesting too, though, because I'm trying to think of what that would even be. I think there's a lot of possible factors. It could be that it's made up for the show, but he seemed to confirm that they both have value, and he didn't say much here, so I'm not too concerned about letting anything slip, because one thing I've noticed talking with the actors is that they really don't know a lot beyond the first season. I mean, and I think that's a smart move that they've done to let them kind of talk thoroughly about their characters and what they're doing, because they're not going to spoil 5 seasons of the show with a slip up.
And can you hear me?
Yes.
So I think what we're looking at is
there it is. That
right
looks
here. Yeah.
like it. Yeah.
Let's get it closer to the. You can. Is it?
Have you got?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's even got that block tower to the left. That looks a lot like Gondolin. Yep.
A lot like Gondolin. So I think, yeah, that's really interesting. And
I asked the question. I know it's been talked about already. I was hoping to get a more solid answer or a better hint, but I think that he said everything he can in that part. So
yeah.
At this point, I knew I had to wrap things up, and so I just asked a couple that I knew wouldn't turn into long conversations. And
no, that's fair.
The Celebrimbor one was like, I mean, if it had spun into something more interesting, I would have loved it, but I got a 2-word answer, and I expected that.
I think you had, from the time you did, it was a lot of insight. I think here it is, the Tower of Turgon. I think that's what it is. And even here you can see, how similar infrastructure wise it is. Wait, let's get like that. Hope you can see that a bit.
Yep.
I think it is really a nice, interesting parallel, and how rights-wise, how that works out as well. So
interesting.
This is still the one biggest thing, the evolution of how the rights are working for the Rings of Power. Yeah. So I think here we've gone today a significant Tim. Yeah. Ooh, here we go. This is where, Jaron, I'm going to do a 2-part question here. You can't spoil about Celebrimbor. Is she alive? She's your future wife. So how is she going to factor into all this? And anything you can tell us about it? Don't know. How with that moment when you ask her that, I don't know. How did you feel? You have to be honest.
I was like I said, I was expecting it, but I was disappointed. I was hoping for something, anything. But honestly, it sounds like he doesn't know. I think, and I was trying to think about the as a fan, the logistics of that, because she has to exist before he meets. So I'm pretty sure off the top of my head that he meets her later in the Second Age, right? And when
they don't get married until the Third Age, of course.
But they meet when Galadriel visits Celeborn. There's that little bit in Unfinished Tales about Galadriel went up and visited Celeborn, and then there's the first time that Elrond met Celebrimbor, and it's like, so that's way into the story, but she can't, if you're compressing the timeline, she can't be born in the second season and then grow up, right?
I really think it would be really, really weird if, we're having this in season 2, we get this young kid like Celebrimbor, and then by season 3 she's married off. It is like it unpacks a whole bag of worms, I think. So I think but
this gotta be off screen. It's like a Narion, right? I think they're off screen. Celeborn
I think with Narion, we know now that he potentially might be in this other city that Lloyd Owen has been on about in his interviews. But I think with Celebrimbor, they must be doing something. If we can read between the lines and this don't know translates to actually him not actually knowing because of the story, then there must be something interesting I'm reading they are trying to do with Celebrimbor. I think I can't top of my head to really think of what they could, do with it. But
yeah, I mean, even if they're just tucking those two like Celebrimbor and Celeborn away temporarily, and they're just kind of in a holding cell until they bring them in more significantly, I think they're doing it very purposefully, because the way they've approached everything about this, I'd be surprised if those characters were like, we missed that in the 4 years we've been working on, like they've got to have some plan. And especially because they meet during the show, so I doubt they're going to just cut that part out. I mean, that's a major through line to the Lord of the Rings that you don't. There's not a lot of those, so they need to work with the ones they've got.
Yeah, and same with Orifer and Thranduil, all those. Hopefully, one day soon. But I think talking about one day soon, and you'd actually tap into season 2 here. He says you limit to think about what he's knowing about. And he says the great thing about the show, as I said earlier, is you have these moments, these plot points on the map, and it's for the boys to. I think the boys is J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay.
It's gotta be,
yeah. That's just a random bit.
That's my. I don't know, but I assumed that was what he was talking about.
To interestingly weave us in between those points, I hope people really enjoy that journey. The Legendarium beautifully poses questions because of different versions or things like that. I think interesting. He knows about the different versions, of course. So like, I think one thing you mentioned earlier, I think a quote up here, I think you mentioned around I know it's a big thing that we're doing here recently about Gil-galad's father, and but then of course Christopher made the mistake, and I think it's interesting to see I think there's lots of different articles down there. You guys have really been on it. So yeah, I think that is interesting to see. Yeah, the last part, Legendarium beautifully poses questions because of different versions or things not specifically said about how somebody felt about something that happened. I think that is going to be a common theme because there's not a lot written on the Second Age, so they're going to really have to see that. And I think, what do you think of the final bit he left us on? One of the funniest things is that, as a fan, you get to see hopefully some of those questions answered, our interpretation of them. I hope people enjoy that because, as a fan, they're interesting questions. Was that a nice thing to leave it on?
It was. I'm not sure if so whenever it goes from audio to written, it always there are little things that bother me. And the tone and the way he was talking here, the fact that he used the word, that he started with one of the funniest things, I'm pretty sure at that point he stopped and kind of restarted his sentence, because I don't think he was saying it's funny that these things will happen. I think his point was more that they really are going to, he's aware as a fan that there are all these versions, and they need to make adaptive decisions that, first of all, pick a version, and second of all, fill in the gaps, and then third of all, make it all flow together, which Christopher spent his life doing that and still was making things like, I wish I hadn't picked a dad for Gil-galad. So the fact that that they're doing that, I think he's aware of the challenge, and at this point he's just sitting back for the ride, which I can relate to. I'm like, listen, there's going to be things I do like and that I don't like, and I just want to see it at this point because it looks amazing. Looks like they've done their homework. They're doing a good job with making it. So now the question is, what creative decisions are they doing in the story itself?
Yeah, and I think in the end of the day, that's one of the most important things. So you have summarized that quite well. And also for people in the chat, if you want to ask Jaron some questions about his experience with Aramayo, things you thought maybe you'd like to have more clarification on some of the questions asked, then please drop them. We can ask them, of course, within reason as well. So and I think but I think I'll just pose one of the questions. As in, I think just to let you elaborate a bit more, what about Aramayo? How after you finished the meeting, and this interview, can you just tell us how you're feeling after conducting such a great interview like this?
Man, it was really fun. So I went into it. I always get nervous before an interview because it's just, even though I'm like, if you didn't see my name at the top of this, you wouldn't know that I did this, because I'm not the one that people want to care about their thoughts. But even so, there's just so many ways it can go wrong. You don't want to do anything incorrectly. And once we started, he was so relaxed, and it felt like he was having a good time. So it was
that's amazing.
When he felt like that, and when we my image on I stuck an image of it's like a painting of the last shot of the Return of the King, the ship going into the west, and it was like my Google profile picture. I want to say it's one of those things where I'll like do something professionally somewhere else, like in a business setting, and it pops up because I do something with my Google login, and it looks kind of off. But he saw it as I'm joining the Zoom call, and he's like, "What is that picture?" And he's asking me questions, and right away you could tell there was this like he wanted to know the Lord of the Rings thing about me, the Tolkien things about me, and I felt like it was a real conversation between Tolkien fans. And honestly, I would put that as the primary takeaway. So like, it was nice to ask questions. It's nice to share them with you guys. But the most present thing during the conversation was that it was two Tolkien fans talking, and it really felt like it.
And that's really, really important. And thank you, Steve Sadler, again for the £9 donation. Great interview, Jaron. Rob comes across very well. Some insightful questions and answers. Fellowship, do you ever sleep? We're up to the lead up of the show. We have to make all the content. So
that's probably my fault too. I'm East Coast. I made you stay up a little longer.
It's barely 9 o'clock, so it should be fine. And then the next question I think Rainbow asks is, I don't get it. Is Elrond a secondary character in Rings of Power? So I think, Jan, that's to you. From reading this, from interviewing him, does it sound like he's a secondary character, or is he going to be a big player in this?
Yeah, so my takeaway, and I don't know a lot more than the rest of you at this point, and we've seen, like, so we were talking about Emdir and Celeborn and Celebrimbor and all these characters that, where are they? And then the next thing I do is I turn around and I write a sentence like, they're trying to manage a sprawling cast of over 20 characters. Like, there's a lot going on here already, just in season 1 to set the stage. So the fact that anyone would be a main character is, to me, I don't even know. We're gonna have to let it shake out and see, because 20 main characters sounds insane to me. And if they're really gonna keep it decentralized like that, I don't know who's gonna feel like a main character, or if that's even the goal here. But based off talking to Robert, I would be surprised if Elrond was pushed to the side or secondary to others, because I mean, we were talking about how there's these general themes in the marketing that a bunch of these characters are going to end up on Numenor. They're going to end up doing something probably in the Southlands or something based off images. And then there's this group, Celebrimbor, Elrond, Durin. They're all going to be not in the South, as far as we can. Maybe they'll be down there. Maybe they bring them all, the whole group together. But like, they're all seen in Moria and probably in Eregion and in Lindon, and there's something else they're setting up there. So it could be that setup phase where it doesn't feel like the action-packed center of the attention, but they absolutely, I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to be really in the limelight in the next few seasons here, and maybe in this season. We've seen him a lot. He's clearly, the camera's following him throughout. So
and I think you mentioned at some point that he does undertake the role of a politician, and seeing that political aspect of Rings of Power might be translated through Elrond, and I think that is a really interesting take. And where was the next question? Okay, Ecthelion of the Fountain asks, question, has Robert Aramayo read the books of History of Middle-earth and the Silmarillion as well as Lord of the Rings? Did he mention that to you at all?
I don't know if I specifically clarified that. There was a conversation I had at one point that might have been with Robert where he mentioned those books.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be surprised if he's absolutely has a set to reference. I mean, I will confess that I haven't read all, 12 of them or whatever.
Yeah.
I've read chunks of all of them, and I'm constantly referencing them. But no, I don't know for sure, but I would guess that he's very well aware of them. So
yeah.
The way he was talking, I mean, the idea that Tolkien and the machine and the rings, those topics don't just get stuck together, and like, you don't read Lord of the Rings and walk away talking like that. Like, you've read some pretty deep letters and essays. So and he was coming up with that on his own. So
I think it just is a testament to how hopefully how great his knowledge actually is. So and I think again, some of the questions, I think we hear one of them, how have you thought about this and how it's going to affect your character, again making them really think. And so overall I think first of all, to the chat, I think you should say, of course, thanks to Jaron for doing this for us. This article, I think I think this and the Celebrimbor article have been two of my favorite ones so far, where we've been really able to dig deep into the actual characters and let them think. I think no, letting them speak, I think is the most important thing. Let them expand themselves. I think that's what you did really, really well. So thank you for that, man.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, it's like I said, it was a pleasure, obviously, as a Tolkien fan, and I really did enjoy queuing up stuff. And it's like the fan heavy version of not a softball question, but like, hey, answer this however you want. But here's a tough question. I want to know what you think about these things. That was really fun to hear him have answers on the spot. I mean, these were questions I asked him, and as I said them, he heard them for the first time, and he had answers right there. So he really knows his stuff.
For sure. I think that does really show through this article, and I think, of course, still we're under 30 days away, maybe pushing 20.
Yeah,
it's getting all these articles is great, and I think getting these insights from the actors on their characters. But it's now time to see, will this portray onto how it is visually on our screens in September? And I think that is the biggest test of it all. But I think at least for Robert Aramayo's case, and I think Jaron, you've met a few of the cast already, but I think for Elrond, I think we are currently in a safe place. I think. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I feel comfortable with everyone I've talked to, but this getting like a solid 20 minutes to talk, and then again time on either side to really kind of chat, and it was like everything I walked away from it with, I was elated that he was so competent, and he was fun to talk to, but he was competent in his knowledge, and that was really encouraging. So
yeah. Indeed. So I think we're going to leave it there. I think we've just been hitting just under an hour. So I think, Jaron, thank you for coming on. Again, it's great to have you on. You always, I think you're technically part of Fellowship fans as well. So you're always
I love it.
Over.
Yeah, so, yeah. I wish I could do more stuff with you guys. It's always fun to come on the show. I appreciate you having me on. Really appreciate it.
I think that's just about it. Unless I don't see any new questions. I don't think Jaron will know the answer to where Celeborn is. So
nope.
So, and I think, yep, that's just about it. Really good article. Of course, the link to the article is, of course, in the description. So, yep, just go and click that. I think Jaron, as you said before, write for Lupa and the half link as well. So that's all in the description.
We'll be doing a deep dive on Celebrimbor right before the show here. So if you want to, I've gathered.
Let's find him.
Every reference I can get on Celebrimbor that Tolkien wrote, and I have condensed them all into 3 episodes for the halfling. So they'll start on Sunday, and then they'll be going weekly until the show. So, and we got some really fun stuff coming up too. Yeah,
for sure. And I think you might have missed a good opportunity looking at this picture of Celebrimbor and Elrond speaking. Do you ask maybe potentially if they were talking about their hair in that picture?
No, I did not. No. So I actually, just if anyone's wondering, I specifically steered away from 2 things: the stereotypical questions we've heard 100 times before, and creative decisions. I really wanted to talk about his character, and that was really. I had like 5 or 6 other questions we didn't even get to, but
do you remember any of them that you would have asked?
I don't have them off the top of my head. I'd have to dig them up. But I was kind of jumping over things, trying to get to the ones that I really wanted to ask, because he was giving me good answers, and so they weren't quick. They were taking time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Quickly, actually, I think, but before we wrap up, I think, which answer do you think was your favorite?
It has to be the Rings of the Machine for the elves. That was. I'm still mulling over how much I even agree with it. I think in general I agree with it, but I have to think about it, and the fact that I'm walking away from a conversation with an actor on the show, and I'm thinking that hard about it, is really, really exciting to me. So that was probably my favorite.
Where he really goes in depth to that. I think that's something we'd normally be talking about to each other for hours on end. So on shows like this, so not with the cast of the show, I think that just shows testament to how great it is. For the elves, the rings are the machine, and I wonder how he feels about it. He doesn't get the ring straight away. That's another one of those interesting moments, an interesting question that hopefully the show will answer of why he doesn't or why he does. That's all for the future, hopefully. And the future is coming quite soon, actually, with the Rings of Power premiering September 2nd. Thank you, Jaron. Thank you to everyone in chat. And I think, thank you to all the regulars. I saw Priscilla, MacLeod, these people I'm seeing on right now. Sean, of course, Steve as well. I'm sorry for Michi Showblaze here. Otake Senpai, Brothers Quinn, and others. So those are the ones I could see right now. But thank you guys. And I think we will catch you later. Goodbye.
All right. Good to see you.
Done.
All right.